Hey everyone! In just a few moments you'll get to hear the interview I did with the creators of The Dragon Prince, Aaron Ehaz and Justin Richmond at Wondercon 2019. Now this is my first time interviewing them in real life, so I was quite nervous, and I noticed I say some things like I'm wondering a lot, as well as some other stuff, so forgive me since I had no idea what I was doing. Also, while I tried to keep it to questions that wouldn't give out huge spoilers, there's a lot of new information learned from this interview. So here's a spoiler warning, just in case. Now, let's begin the interview. Thank you guys so much again for joining me. So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. Season 3 was just announced today. Yeah. Pretty awesome, but obviously you don't have too much information about that just yet. But I'm going to ask some questions about like Season 1 and Season 2.
We might have some information.
You might ask questions. We can always say no.
We overthink everything so far in advance on this, a lot of it. So we know a lot I Season 3.
Oh, I thought you created
What?
You created the show, right?
Yeah,
so you know.
Right. But I mean, we know a lot of answers. So
you can ask us some questions about Season 4, which has not been announced or renewed or anything. But we could give you some answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I might ask some tough questions that you might not be able to answer.
Okay. So sounds fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were introduced to a lot of characters in Season 2, and I'm wondering if we'll continue to see like the same amount of new characters every season, or like in Season 3, I guess.
There are going to be new characters and significant characters.
I don't think there was many new.
I mean, some of it is like you're getting to know. You just met Janai, for example. Though I don't think we said her name in Season 2, and she is going to have some really significant role to play in the next season and in the coming seasons. Yeah. Obviously, Aaravos, his influence and power is only growing. But yeah, we have a handful of.
There's new stuff.
Cool new characters that are coming your way.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I made like a video about Aaravos recently, speaking of him, and one thing that I talked about a little bit was the key of Aaravos. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering, when I made that theory, I was wondering like, how did Harrow have that, or not have it, but how did he even know about Aaravos? Did he know, like how much does he know about him? Or, because Viren didn't seem to know anything.
Do you want to know the answer? You're the first person to ask that. I will tell you if you want to know.
My viewers would be happy to know.
Okay. The key was passed down to him, and a lot of its significance has been forgotten. One of his ancestors knows the importance of the key.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a very specific, very cool story.
We have a story for this ancestor.
Yeah.
Oh, is it the one that we saw a painting of, or?
I don't.
No, it is not.
Oh.
No, yeah.
It's a female ancestor.
Oh,
awesome. Yeah, so I have some questions about like the magic of this world. So, there are mages, like you mentioned, like, obviously mages, and Callum is one. Is there other things like sorcerers or wizards or anything else in this world, or is it just all mages, basically, or what they're called?
I don't think we have a distinction. I think that's just terminology. There might be people who refer to themselves as sorcerers or wizards.
Yeah. I think it's all based on the same magic
now we've
system.
Just called people mages or dark mages. Yeah.
Personally, I don't know the differences, but people like talking like
sometimes, like in Dungeons and Dragons, there's like really specific differences between those things. Like a sorcerer and a wizard are not the same thing, and they have different schools.
Is that right?
Yeah, they're very, very different. Like they behave differently, and their mechanics are all different. So it's not like that for us.
Yeah, awesome. And so I was wondering about dark magic. So I know you talked a little bit on Twitter of like how you were mentioning like stuff with dark magic, but also like is everything that dark magic can do, is that replicate? Like, can you replicate it with primal magic?
There's probably a lot of overlap. Like one of the examples we always talked about in the beginning was we said, okay, well, primal. Oh, this might be new information.
I don't know which one you're going to say.
So some primal magic, there are rare gems that have primal magic in them. So for example, you see Runaan in, is it the first episode? Crush a moon opal and use its essence to create a moon primal spell, right? So one of the things we talked about early on is that these rare gems would be infused with primal essence and magic that you could crush. But the comparison would be you have to use like an incredibly rare fire ruby that you could crush to make a fireball.
That's worth a fortune.
Or you could just take an emberback spider and crush and you have a fireball. So there's always this idea that there are more complex ways, more expensive and rarefied ways to get at the magic you want without dark magic. Dark magic is just a cheap, fast, easy way to do it, and it requires an act of destruction and consumption, right? A sacrifice.
And it takes something of the user to do it, too.
Mm-hmm. And so, since I mentioned primal sources, I was wondering also that is there only like really one or two main powers that go with each primal source, like with the moon is illusion? Is that basically what it is?
I think there's a range. There's an area, right? So we've always moon magic connects to appearances, but it also is the magic of life and death. So eventually you might find darker explorations of moon magic that could connect to some spookier stuff.
Yeah. It's not as narrow as like one or two things. Like it's much more broad than that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So I would also like to talk about Rayla and Callum. So some people were wondering, could you describe the way Rayla and Callum's relationship has changed from the beginning of season 2 to the end?
I don't understand at all what people are referring to. This is so strange.
I didn't think of this when somebody else asked me.
I mean, I think they had to get over this big hump of her holding back the secret of what happened to King Harrow.
Yeah.
And dealing with that, and I think he initially was very upset with her, and then when he couldn't share it with Ezrin himself, he came to understand a little more where she was coming from. I don't know. I mean, I think there are two people from different sides of the world, with different upbringings and cultures and understandings that have a similar goal of trying to find a peace that seemed impossible before, of trying to change things together, and they're going through this experience together, and it's a meaningful experience. I don't know. They're certainly learning to trust and respect each other and rely on each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Callum, was trusting of Soren and Claudia at first because he knew them for so long.
Yeah, he's known them for a long time. But yeah, he and Rayla are going through something pretty intense right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, how would you say, like, his relationship with Claudia and Soren is now that everything that's happened in season 2?
I think he's in a different spot, right? Like, he saw Claudia do something really gnarly, right? Like, she tried to bring down the Moon Phoenix and, like, all of that stuff. And I think, they're still friends from when they were kids, right? Mm-hmm. So they've known each other for years and years and years. But I think there's definitely a more complicated relationship now for them, right? Like, I think that's something where he did dark magic in front of Claudia, right? So there's definitely another thing there, right? So there's a bunch of stuff, I think, wrapped up in that. So I think their relationship is going to be, there's going to be some questions. Between them, I mean, not for the audience, but.
So, speaking of Soren and Claudia, some of my favorite characters, but I was wondering how, maybe we'll see some of this. How does Soren feel after Claudia healed him? Because she didn't even ask about, he wanted that to happen to him. How would you say Soren feels from that?
Soren has gone through something really big. I think the moment where he says, in a way, when he's a guy who gets paralyzed and has a moment where he's like, almost relieved because he can't do the horrible thing he was asked to do. Yeah. I mean, to be in that place, to be at that kind of moment of clarity, I don't know. I feel like Soren is going to have some things to sort out. They're headed back. They're going to see their dad. Their dad is in a new situation. They're going to find out what's happened to him. They're both going to have to kind of disentangle what they've been told, how they feel about their dad, how they feel about the princes, where their loyalties lie, those kinds of things. And I think it's going to be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if Soren would have ever asked her. I never thought about this, but I don't know if he would have ever asked her to heal him. If she had not done it on her own. I don't know if he'd ever asked the question. I've never thought about that, but.
Wasn't he pretty okay with just being?
I mean, in the moment, right? He's only been that way for a couple of days, right?
Yeah.
So it's I wonder if given weeks and weeks and weeks, if he would have said, "Hey, would you heal me or not?" Knowing that it would cost something from her. So, It's an interesting question.
And speaking of the cost, she had to sacrifice a deer to get that done. But are there any other possible side effects that might happen to Soren or anything, or is it just that was the trade-off and that was it?
Well, it's more than the deer, right? I mean, if you look at her.
Oh, yeah,
right,
her too.
I think it costs the caster something really. Dark magic's not good for you, man. So I don't think it costs Soren anything. I think that the person who got it given into them, obviously there's the emotional fallout of it, but it's not he's crawling with dark magic now. Mm-hmm. But it does cost Claudia a lot.
Yeah, so interesting point. Because you see how obviously Viren is now. When he uses dark magic a lot, he turns totally I don't know, a different color palette or something.
Yeah.
What, is there anything to that, or is it just like, because he still seems to act normal after that, and yeah.
Yeah, I think we always talk about it as dark magic is this act of consumption and sacrifice where you're taking this creature and you're consuming, destroying, and then outputting its magical energy, right? And in the case of dark magic, the dark mage is acting as a vessel and as they really do. They take it in and then they output it. And so over time, that twisting of energy, of this kind of magical life energy, like I think it hollows you out. It affects you. It does something, right? And that's what you see happening has happened to Viren. Now, Viren does a ritual, as we've all figured out, where he's figured out something cosmetic that will cover up what's happened. But if you can imagine, he's on the inside, he's what he looks like. The truth of him is what he looks like in those dark magic moments. But the butterflies he uses create the cosmetic illusion that he's still normal. Claudia is really just beginning to be affected and be changed by her use of dark magic. So we're starting to see her be affected by it too.
Awesome. So I'd like to also talk about Rayla a bit more. So we didn't learn too much about her in season 2. Is there anything like you can tell us about her childhood or anything?
Yeah, sure.
There's stories, yeah.
You know that her mom and dad became part of the Dragon Guard. There's some implications in some of the credits in the back that I think during parts of life when they were on duty and doing what they needed to do, that Runaan was a father figure to her. He's someone who helped to raise her and care for her and protect her. And we will find out more about that and what that was like in season 3.
So is that why she wanted to become an assassin, or was that something else, a reason for that?
Yeah, I think she was connected to him. I think in particular, there was extra motivation connecting to what happened with her parents and and the egg, right? And the thought that, well, her family was supposed to protect this. Well, they couldn't protect it. At the very least, she's going to help right the wrong, right? She's going to follow through on that. Yeah. So I think that if there was a moment where she was choosing that her parents' involvement or failure to protect the egg is part of what made her feel committed to joining Runaan on this assassination.
Also, being raised with an uncle or like a cousin who's an assassin, we're more likely to fall into that line of business, I think.
Makes sense.
We'll find out more about that.
Yeah, season 3.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We also know a lot about her childhood also, so there are stories to be told there at some point.
Awesome. Yeah, so finally I'd like to ask about Ezrin a bit. So you said originally you changed up how then to season 2 for him. Like, what was the thought process between that with that?
We thought he was going to go to Zadia.
Yeah.
We thought he was going in with everybody else.
That's right.
And but we also knew that he was going to find out what had happened to his father, and that he was the rightful heir, and that he was supposed to be king. And we just thought, oh man, Ezrin wants to take Zim home. He wants to do this, but he's going to feel this sense of obligation that's like, hey, like, I've got to try to change things from the throne. I've got to step up, like, and that's that's what we're going to see. One of the things we were talking about earlier was, King Harrow says, what's his exact quote in the second episode? Maybe he says, "The great illusion of childhood is that adults have all the power, freedom and power, but the truth is a child is freer than a king." Well, now a child is the king,
right?
Oh.
Right. So what does that mean?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it was funny. It was when we started. I can't remember exactly that. Started talking about Corvus and how much Corvus knows and all that kind of stuff, and it became obvious. Like, oh, Ezrin's going to have to find out.
Yeah.
And then, oh boy, right? So.
Well, awesome. I think that's all the questions I have.
Cool.
Nice.